All right. So let's go ahead and whether you did your interface the same way I had intended or not, let's get a starting point for ours. So we have, I think we already have it, right? Yeah, we have three linear, vertical linear layouts next to each other. And we want to go ahead and give these guys a percentage width within this guy. So this horizontal linear layout that these guys live within is set to match parent for width. So I think we talked about some of that stuff last semester, right? At least some of it. Let's review it. So these guys are also set to match parent for width. What we really want these guys to do is it's strange. I double clicked when I shouldn't have double clicked. Is that what happened? So let's go ahead and do 33.33%. I think that'll do something there. And then we'll do the same thing here, 33.33%. And then we'll do 33.33%. Okay, so that doesn't appear to be where... Actually, I think it's maybe, is it 0.33? There's like a way to denote this. Otherwise, you run into the... yeah, it doesn't like that. See, otherwise you run into the issue of it looking different on different size interfaces. So is it not on layout width? Is it somewhere else for actual width, maybe? Does anybody remember where it was? It's min width. Because we want this guy to control how wide our labels or buttons that we drop in there are. No, I think it's layout width. Here, let's do Android layout with 33%, something like that. All right, so that's relative. We don't want that. Is there a weight thing? I really thought that was a thing. 33%. Maybe we need to have something in there for it to... So let's set it to match parent. Let's go to this one that has a button in it. Let's go to with 33%. It's not making a difference. I mean, we can... Oh, it doesn't let me drag it either. That's match parent. Which property is it? Unless we change those to relative layouts. This should. Oh, I think it's what you put in after this is like px for percent. I think we could do something like this. We could do something like 100 dp. Something like that will give us the right look on this size interface, but I thought there was is it PX? 33. No. Nobody did this in their project? How'd you do your layout?
I was the way I did it.
Linear layout percent width. Yeah, this is what I want, is a percentage of the screen. So they have this layout weight. Okay, it's called weight sum. Oh, but then it's a relative layout inside.
Yeah. I was looking for pretty similar things, and a lot of the stuff that I saw is like they want, when people are trying to give help, they want you to throw like relative layouts inside of your linear layouts and like change the weight of the different layouts to make them stack in the right order.
But then you lose the ability to have your layouts automatically act as a stack.
Yeah. So it wouldn't work for our case, so I didn't do it.
I really think there's a way to do this otherwise. Android layout weight 0.7. Yeah, they're showing this layout weight thing as doing it. So they're setting all of these to match parent. It might just be something we can't do from the outside here. Because I don't see a layout weight in there, but if we go to the text,
Yeah, weight doesn't even show by default. You have to like put it down.
and then it does it.
I believe so.
This is the, which one's this? Let's match, that's match, that's match. Okay, those are all matching. Oh, that's the height, that's fine. Okay, so Android dot layout weight, and what did I do? 30. It's a percent. Okay, so 0.33 like that. Okay, well that seemed to make a difference for the height of it. Layout. I guess let's see what this ends up doing. So let's make these all.
So you have kind of more loud section than a quiet section over here.
Okay. All right, so that gives us the percent thing, but the height's actually correct because I only have one button in there. As we add more stuff, it should get taller because it is matching. Actually, it's wrapping content. No, that's for the button. Yeah, I think this gives us what we want. That's interesting. Oh, here it is out here. Layout weight. Unless that was something that wasn't there until I added it there. I don't know. Here, we can click on this guy and find out. Where was it? In these. Layout weight was underneath elevation. Yeah, it's not there unless you manually type it in. All right, well, whatever. Okay, so let's kind of get a functional piece of our interface working here. So what I have up here is kind of a landing zone. So this guy is going to be, well, it's a horizontal linear layout, but the idea here is that when we click on, and these guys can be labels in here or buttons. I think my idea for this is, let's see, these guys were horizontal linear layouts. So really, let me throw a label in here just so we can have a, where's my, what is, not a text view. It is a text view. So we'll go ahead and throw a label inside of that guy, and we're going to get rid of the button that was in there. And I'll do the same thing here. Get rid of the button. And then the same thing here. Get rid of the button. And then maybe we have buttons above these guys. So what we can actually do is we can throw a button here. Let's put another button right below them, or right next to them. This is horizontal. Another button there. So those relatively to our columns. Now we want all those buttons actually be at the bottom here, so they're floating above this. So we'll set the gravity of this linear layout to bottom. Where's gravity? All right, so I set the gravity of that guy to bottom. And we'll go ahead and maybe change the names on these guys. Want to let me do it by double clicking? No, it sets it up over here. That's fine. So let's do call 0, call 1, call 2 for which column. Actually, it's probably tower. Tower is the better. Tower 0. Tower 1. Tower 2. All right, and the idea is when we click on one of those towers, we want to pop off the we want to pop off of there the current thing that's on there and kind of stage it up top is kind of what I'm thinking. All right, so we'll have a label leave here and come up here, and these labels kind of represent our individual disks on our tower. All right, but right now we'll just have it say text view. Let's have them do. We'll just put some equal signs in there. All right. So for right now, there'll just be 3 different numbers of equal signs so we can make sure we see the right guy leave. All right. And originally, we probably want those guys to be on the same tower, but we'll keep them separate for the moment. Okay. So let's go ahead, and we want these guys to have some names, right? So right now, this text view has an ID. So let's call this, we'll call this guy disk 3. Actually, since we're doing everything else 0 base, we'll say that's disk 2. This is disk 1. This is disk 0. All right, that way we have the ability to access those disks programmatically, right? We've given ourselves an ID into those so that we can grab them from our code. And what we ultimately want to do is we want this guy, for instance, when we hit this button, we want this label to leave this linear layout and get added to another linear layout. Okay, so here are my buttons for my linear layouts. In fact, I can go ahead and just have I have the height now wrap content. And now I'm going to throw another linear layout above that guy, kind of my landing zone. So we'll go ahead and we'll put a horizontal linear layout right there. And we're going to have this guy be significantly smaller. It'll actually end up being wrap content. And I have no content in there yet. But as an example, if I go ahead and let's just throw a text view in that guy as a placeholder. So you'll see now it wraps that text view. You know, it's there's something in there. All right. And we probably maybe want to have our staging area show that as centered. So we'll go ahead and set the gravity for that linear layout to center. So whenever I take a label and move it from this guy and add them to this guy, it'll go ahead and it'll lay it out. Well, did I choose horizontal? It probably doesn't matter in this case, but I think I did. It'll lay it out horizontally next to his friends, which will be none. And I'm going to set the gravity to center, so it'll just be in the center of that little square. All right, so let's go ahead and let's set this guy's. That's the horizontal one. This actually is not currently inside of that. Now it's inside of that. So now there's the horizontal linear layout. Oh, I got to click View All Properties. And we'll go down to gravity. And we'll change that guy's gravity. We can do center horizontally or just center. Here's center vertically, here's center horizontally. And we need to have our label here set to probably have a max width rather than a match parent. So if we have it as wrap content. Oh, interesting. Let's try center entirely. Why is that not centering it? We could fix it by just centering the text inside of our label, but we really want our, I mean, these discs have a physical size, right? You know, then the size is a third of the screen width. So we don't want our disc to get stretched all the way out here because we end up throwing a picture or something like that on the disc. We don't want that picture to get all stretched out across the top of the screen as our placeholder. So we really want to maintain the width of that guy up here. So this is wrap content for the width of our label, which seems right. This guy, the width of that is match parent, which is correct. We want that to be the whole width. The height is wrap content, which is fine. That makes it, you know, not too tall, so it doesn't push the rest of our stuff off the screen. But we'd like for the gravity inside of there to be centered horizontally. Why is that not doing that? I'm not sure what the difference is between gravity and layout gravity, but I would have expected them to act the same. I wonder if I change this linear layout to be its orientation to be vertical, if it'll fix. I wonder if the fact that it's horizontal and I have only a single thing in there. Yeah. So being horizontal, a horizontal linear layout must have overridden gravity to give room to throw things horizontally in there, I'm guessing is the way that seemed to act. So I'm only going to put one thing in there. So I just made this guy vertical, which then allowed me to throw one thing in there. If I throw more things in there, they'll stack on top of each other, but I'm just going to have one thing.
Since you were switching to horizontal, what if you just needed to center vertically?
That's actually an interesting point. It doesn't make sense that that's the way it should work, but it might work that way. So now it's back to horizontal. So you want, but yeah, I don't think it's going to work because I had tried just doing center, but let's try center vertically. Yeah, it doesn't make the difference. But it's an interesting thought that it might work that way. Yeah, I'm thinking that the way that they've implemented horizontal linear layouts is they must reserve the space around it to help do real-time layouts. So the fact that I'm only using it for one thing and I'm trying to say center that thing kind of isn't overriding. It probably has something to do with one of the weights. Like if I fix the right, like a lot of times the weights are like the precedence this particular decision has over the other decisions. So maybe if I start messing with those, my centering would ultimately have a higher precedent than the prepare for more horizontally laid out stuff. But we're only going to have one thing, so we'll make it vertical. So this guy's going to be our bucket for that. Now, we want to have these linear layouts here, so we have just linear layouts laid all over the place. In our world, a linear layout is a view. It's a container that holds other views. Okay? So I have several containers here that I'm going to be operating out of. One of these containers is this vertical linear layout up here. He's my temporary container or something like that, or my staging area, however you want to call it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to give that guy an ID consistent with that, because we need to be able to reference him from code and say, I want to take something, I want to put it into my staging area, rather than us having to go and find it as, linear layout 13-2 or something like that. All right, so we're going to give this guy an ID, and it's not that one, it's this one. All right, and we're going to call this guy staging area. All right, so notice its name changed here. He is a vertical linear layout, but he's my staging area. So now I have a way of accessing him programmatically. So let's start connecting some of those dots as we go through here. So let's go back to our main activity, and let's give ourselves access to that staging area since we're going to need it. So we'll go into main activity here. And we might need this in several different places inside of our code in here for this interface. So let's go ahead and make this a global variable inside of this activity. All right, so we'll make it private. And this guy is going to be it's just going to be a view. Let's see, what's that, option enter? Yeah. And we're going to call this guy staging area right there. All right, now down here, we can go ahead and set up our, let's just do it. I don't know what to write it in the comment really. So we'll say this dot staging area is equal to the view version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot staging area. All right, so remember, this is how we ultimately connect the dots. Is this text big enough? We see the text back here, back in the back? Not really, it's too small. Colors and fonts. Font. How do I make it larger? I think I might have to change it away from, we'll do default copy. Okay, that lets me change it. So let's make it 18. Is that perfect, or is that still a little tiny?
I'm not wearing my glasses.
So I can make it size 30 and it means nothing to you.
Hold on, I can read it.
Okay. Back row, is this good? Bigger, smaller, perfect? Perfect, okay. All right, so let's give ourselves a little more. Actually, I can just do this. Here, now we can fit more code on the screen. All right, so I went ahead and I gave myself a variable to hold my view. I don't actually have access to that until on create. Remember, on create's when our activity first kind of becomes a thing. Before that, everything's just an idea. We plan on our layout actually having these buttons and crap like that on it, but not until we've actually set the content view of this. There's a little hidden this dot in front of that guy that I always like to put in there, but it wasn't needed. So we're saying we want this particular activity to set his content view to this activity main, and activity main is the dude we've been designing over here. Okay, so it wasn't until that point in time that all of those layouts and buttons and crap like that become available to us. So that's why we defined the variable up here. We said, look, I want this guy to have a scope that's global to this class, so that I can use it in different functions in here. Whether or not that ends up being absolutely necessary or not, we'll figure it out, but this gave us some flexibility. But I can't actually give him his value until after this line, when this guy actually exists, when he's a thing. That makes sense? All right, so the order kind of makes some sense here. You can't connect this guy to this guy until this guy actually exists. All right? Can't put batteries in the remote control car until you first bought it from the store. I don't know. Now I want a remote control car. I wanted a remote control helicopter for like one of the big ones, or the quadcopters, like the really cool drone things for Christmas. My wife wouldn't get it for me because she thought I'd fly it in the house and break stuff.
Your ceilings aren't that high.
She's likely very right, but all right. So we gave ourselves access to that guy. So let's go ahead and give ourselves access to some of these other things. Now, do we need access to the buttons themselves, or do we just need to know when a button was clicked? We think about our interface here. I'm going to click on Tower 0, and what the action I want to occur there is I want whatever guy's on the top of this tower to pop off there and push onto there as my staging area. I don't actually need to know about these individual physical buttons programmatically. I'm not going to be changing the names of them or anything like that, but I need to be able to respond to the clicks on them. All right, so I don't need to get programmatic access to those 3 widgets there. Now, I do, though, need programmatic access to our 3 towers, right? So we'll come down here. So this is our first tower. So let's give this guy, we'll stay consistent. We'll call that guy Tower 0. This guy is Tower 1. This guy is Tower 2. All right, so we gave our towers 3 names that are somewhat meaningful on our interface here, and then we'll go ahead and give ourselves programmatic access to them inside of here. Now, one thing we might do, so I'm going to say private view, Tower 0, Tower 1, Tower 2, these guys are all linear layouts, right? But we can either remember that these guys are vertical linear layouts. They're already set up like that. Or we could name it with that in mind. We could say something like if we had, especially if we had a lot of widgets happening, we might choose to name this guy Tower 0 underscore vert LL or something like that. Just to kind of remind us that that dude will act like a stack. Does that make sense? Now, we're dealing with a small enough number of widgets here, and that seems like it's going to be inconvenient enough to type that let's just leave it at Tower 0, but just more from a larger programming aspect. If you're writing a large application and you have different things that act different ways, especially since all of these guys at the end of the day are normal plain Jane views, okay? But because we created that view to act a certain way, we might want to give us a little information about that dude in the variable name. Alternatively, and maybe this is the easier thing for us to do right here, we might choose to put a little comment next to this guy saying something like vertical linear layout. Just reminding us that that's the kind of animal that guy is, so that when we add labels to it, they're going to stack on top of each other. Does that make sense? So maybe that's a good use of a comment for your code. Now, one thing that I kind of teach, and this becomes more of a personal preference, and I think some of the other, certainly in the earlier classes when you do some of the programming in like 150 and 175, don't they kind of emphasize like commenting everything? I'm not an advocate of that. You want to have enough, so right or wrong, let's just assume I'm right. Comments are important, but comments get lost in the details if you comment everything. All right, so it would not be a good idea to never have comments in your code. But there is this concept of self-documenting code. Now, I think it would be extremely unlikely, except for in a very, very, very small program, for you to be able to fully self-document your code by just variable names. All right, but you could take a step in that direction by always, creating variable names that have meaning, that kind of stuff. Functions that have a meaningful name, so they are effectively self-documenting. And then you add a level of comment to your code to further elaborate where it makes sense. Now, you could probably make an argument to throw a comment before every function, just with a quick little gist of what this function does. Okay, that's probably a reasonable rule of thumb. But now to throw a comment next to every single variable, that I think becomes overkill. Certainly variables that maybe have importance, right? You might say the vertical linear layout represents far left tower or something like that. That kind of comment is meaningful. That maybe gives us some help. Whether you read it or not is a whole different story. But it's probably appropriate to label this guy represents area where popped disk waits for destination or something like that. Okay, those are reasonable comments. But if you comment every single variable, including like int I and stuff like that inside your entire program, I think the details of your comments get lost. So they're no longer bringing attention to the things that really need comments. Instead, you just have this wall of comments, and nobody's going. It's like the very first thing you do when you open a package that you get is you throw away the instructions, right? They're on the floor. They're basically trash for later, right? So enough comments to keep you on track, not so many comments that they become meaningless in the wall of text. All right, and this kind of becomes more of a personal preference thing, but I think the biggest rule of thumb is always name your variables something meaningful so they at least start off being somewhat self-documenting. All right, and you're going to hear different teachers will have a different take on the level of commenting that is necessary, and I don't know that any of them are wrong. But I'm kind of sharing with you my sort of approach is name variables and functions something very meaningful, and then comment where it needs additional explanation. But in practice, I tend to not comment very much. So, because I write perfect code the first time around, so I never really have to go back and debug. It's kind of the thing. So basically, I make all my source code files read-only, is immediately following the first compile. is what I do. All right, so we have our tower 0, so we'll go ahead and say this dot tower 0 is equal to the view version of this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot tower 0. And we'll do the equivalent stuff for our tower 1, tower 2. So there's our tower 1, there's our tower 2. This is our middle tower. This is our far right tower. So you see how that's just a time waster. But whatever, we'll stick with it. All right, then we'll go ahead and give ourselves access to those down here. Tower 1, tower 2, tower 1, tower 2. Okay, so these guys we know act as stacks. Okay, and we're going to kind of take advantage of that here in a few minutes. All right, so we have the 3 towers, we have our staging area. All right, now we want to have the ability to handle our buttons, right? To react to our buttons. So we're going to say, let's go, what is it? Public void tower 0 button pressed. I think that will give us access to these guys. Let's see which, let's do this for, well, let's just do tower 0 first. That way we can see this guy kind of work. So when tower 0 button is pressed, when that guy actually happens, we want to go ahead and we want to remove we're going to probably have some error checking to make sure there's actually stuff in tower 0, but we'd like to remove whatever's currently at the top of tower 0 and put it onto our staging area. We might put it right back if we choose a bad destination in a second, but just to kind of work with the mechanics of our interface as a starting point here, we want to go ahead and we want to talk to this view that is tower 0. All right, so this dot tower 0 dot this guy has views by ID inside of it. Okay, but really what I want to do is I want to get the guy at the top. So let's see, what do we have in here? Do we just have views? Get root view, I don't think does it. Yeah, this is not going to get us what we want, I don't think. I think we can get the views as an array. Let's just do a quick search. Android view get first subview. Might just be called subviews. Okay, so it's get child count. All right, so we got to treat this guy as a view group first. In fact, we probably, since we know those guys are going to be so we have this thing called a view group, which is like a view. So a view that has no subviews is a view. A view that has subviews is a view group, right? Because he has a collection of stuff inside of him. So we'll go ahead and say tower 0, tower 1, tower 2. These guys are actually view groups because they may hold collections of things. So then down here, when we talk about tower 0, we can say this dot tower 0 dot, yeah, so that's where we start getting the add view. I think we can get, there's get child count, there's get child at index. So I think we want index 0. I'm pretty sure it goes from top to bottom. So we're going to say get child at index, which is going to give us some view. So let me show you the return value of this guy. Get child at index returns a view, because a view group holds a collection of views. Now, anything we see on the screen is a view. That means buttons are views, labels are views, or text views or views, whatever they call them in Android. Okay, all these guys are views. All right, anything we see. So a view group, which are tower 0, tower 1, tower 2 are, they're going to hold a collection of things. They could be labels and buttons and all sorts of different things in there, but when they come out as generic views. We can then convert them to something else, but we're going to actually store a whole bunch of things that are of very specific types, right? Our tower 0, tower 1, tower 2, they're all going to hold, right now they're all holding text views or whatever it is. Later on, they'll probably hold something called a disk, right? And a disk will be a representation of a text view or something like that. All right, but let's go ahead and get the element at bucket 0, but we probably can go ahead and ask for the child count first. So we can go ahead and do a little error checking right now. So we can do something like if this dot tower 0 dot was it child count? Get child count is greater than 0. So as long as there's something in that tower, let's go ahead and get it. Right now, we're not doing the logic as to whether or not we're the source or the destination, but we'll add that here in a second. We just want to see the mechanics of removing something from here and adding something to here. Okay? So if this is the case, we'll go ahead and say view temp is equal to this dot tower 0 dot get child at index, and we'll say 0. And this guy's going to come out as a generic view right now, even though we happen to know it's a text view. But it doesn't matter because we're just going to put him someplace else as a view. All right, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to add him to our staging area just to see that this button takes from here and puts it to here. All right, as we're manipulating our interface. So we'll have temp, and then we'll say this dot staging area dot. Staging area also needs to be a view group. Now we can say add view, and we can choose to add views at a specific index inside of there if we want. We happen to know that our logic is going to say that our staging area at any point in time will only have one thing in it. So we can just add the view, right? Because unless we break our logic and we start adding multiple things there, adding a view is going to add it at position 0 or whatever. So the view we want to add here is temp. All right, and that's going to be when tower 0 button is pressed. We're going to say as long as there's something in tower 0, go ahead and remove it. This effectively will pop it. I'm pretty sure bucket 0 is the top. We'll experiment a little bit in a minute, but this will pop it off of that view group, and then into this variable temp, and then we'll go ahead and push it or add it to our staging area as a temporary placeholder for us to then prepare to click where our destination should be. All right. So we need to go ahead and we need to let our layout know that that button responds to an action. The on click for that button, button 0, needs to respond to that guy. So here is our tower 0, and we go down to on click. And I'm just going to paste. What did it not copy? Oh, it's because I didn't fully write the thing correctly. This guy takes a view v as a parameter. So the default method for in iOS, and this is something you guys will see before the hackathon when I do the crash course the night before, iOS has something called an IB action. That is a action related to an event in Interface Builder, where this dude over here is Interface Builder, the place where we're building our interface. All right, so this is an action associated with something that might happen over there. In Android, it's just a normal plain Jane function. We don't put any special descriptors in front of it. But he will take in, as a view, the dude who called him. All right, so tower 0 button pressed will become aware of himself. All right, now keep in mind that tower 0 button pressed, we only know that this is associated with tower 0 because we wrote tower 0 in there. We could just as easily have called this guy elephant. And this function we could associate with the on click of 10 different buttons. So we might be interested in knowing who called me. Which button did you click to actually call this function? Does that make sense? That's the purpose of that value in there. Okay. So now I'm going to still copy that. Now we'll come back out here. We'll click on this guy. We'll go to on click. Now he sees that guy, and well, let's just roll with it. Let's see if they've, if they fixed that bug. If you remember from last semester, there was some there's an issue with it auto-detecting those, where sometimes it wouldn't actually work for the click. So let's see what happens. Otherwise, I always paste it, just paste it in there. But let's go ahead now, and the idea is that guy should do something, and just for our own sense, let's do a system.out.println, and just so we can see it, I'm going to put a bunch of asterisks before it. I'm going to say clicked. That should show up in our console, and we should be able to find it by the wall of asterisks we have before it. All right. And we're going to go ahead and let's launch this just so we can test to see what our layout initially looks like. And all these guys have exactly one label in there, so its child count should be greater than 0. And only this button is hooked up. So what we hope to see happen is that, and actually we need to get rid of this placeholder text view here, because that the whole idea is our staging area should be empty, right? So we'll get rid of that little staging area thing there. So we still have staging area, but it doesn't have a label in there currently. So the idea is now when we click Tower 0, it should remove the child at position 0 in it and add it to our staging area. That's what we're hoping occurs. So let's go ahead and launch this guy. Do we even have a dude created? Pick your favorite device. Do we have a Nexus Note 7? That was the one that was exploding, right? Note 7s?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of those like phone tablets that's huge.
Right. Do I really not have a... How long is that going to take to download? It seriously couldn't come with... Well, while this is cooking, let's go ahead and write our other pieces. Doesn't look like it's going to take all that long. Oh, I can't write the other pieces? All right, well, let's go over to this then, and let's finish designing our interfaces. Now, a couple of things we might want to do here. Let me go ahead and draw my screen on here, and then we'll put another couple other pieces. Let's color code these guys. Perfect fit. Man, it's amazing how you can just eyeball something like that and it just works. I mean, it's just pure talent. That's what that is. Okay, so those are our 3 towers. Then we have a couple of buttons at the top of those guys. All right, and this guy is what, Tower 0. Tower 1. Tower 2. Something like that. All right, then we have our staging area above that. And our staging area is not always going to have stuff in it. And because its height wraps content, it's not actually always going to be taking up any space. But in our little view here, we'll have it always take up some space. All right. So this is kind of what our interface looks like. Now what we need to have happen is, and we currently have our button where if we click on this button, whatever's in here pops off, we're going to put it here. Of course, we're going to test here as soon as this guy is done cooking. But we want to start thinking ahead to the nature of our Towers of Hanoi game. So last class we wrote our text-based Towers of Hanoi, right? Because something that we're going to end up having to do here is, at this point, we're just writing the mechanics, seeing stuff move from one linear layout to another linear layout, kind of Android mechanics. Has nothing to do with Towers of Hanoi, except we just happen to be playing a different game on the Towers of Hanoi court. I think that's what they call it in professional Towers of Hanoi circuit international rules. But we're not playing Towers of Hanoi right now. We're just kind of screwing around on the Towers of Hanoi court. Or maybe it's like soccer, it's the pitch. It's the Towers of Hanoi pitch is what it is. But ultimately, we're going to have to ask the question. We're always going to be allowed to hit this button. As long as there's something on here, we'll be allowed to pop it onto our staging area. That's never against the rules. But we might not be able to push it back onto our destination. That might be against the rules. Now, as it stands right now, the way we have this represented is we have these guys in here as just labels, right? Okay, we have these labels. And these labels, we can put text on them or something like that. So I suppose if we were desperate, we could say something like, okay, well, let's look at the text that's on the label that we just popped off and say, how many equal signs do you have? If you have less equal signs than the label that's at the top of this guy, then we're going to go ahead and let you live or something like that. Okay? So what we really need to do is we need to wrap our disks, wrap these labels inside of an object. Okay, effectively our disk object from last class, right? So a disk had a size. A disk knew how to display itself, right? Okay, when we went and did our display, we had a string we built up, right? That had the correct number. I think we used equal signs. Had the correct number of equal signs in it. And then whenever we displayed it, we just printed out that display string. Well, what's changed here is the only thing that's changed is the way that we display a disk is not by printing out the string. Now it's about providing the label that represents this guy to whoever needs it. That makes sense? So these dudes right here are in fact linear layout stacks, if you will, okay, because they are vertical linear layout. So they are effectively a stack data structure like we've been talking about. But, and actually they kind of operate as an upside down stack, because if you keep dropping stuff into a linear layout, it shows up at the bottom, I believe. So you could think of it as an upside down stack. But this guy, this stack, we built our stack to be able to hold a disk object, right? So when we wrote Towers of Hanoi last time, we have a tower, which is an implementation of a stack that knows how to hold stacks of disk objects, which is what we wrote. In this case, the stack that comes with the vertical linear layout in Android is something that knows how to hold stacks of views. Make sense? We need something a little bit more than that. We need to add our logic into that. So we need to have a almost something that goes alongside these towers. We can have an object that holds a tower, and that object controls what's allowed to come on and off that tower. But what we probably need to do is, this is almost, if we go back to last semester, we talked about parallel arrays. Now we almost have a parallel stack type of a problem-solving approach, where I have internally inside my tower object, I have a stack of disks. And then we have a visual version of my tower object, which is the vertical linear layout that my logic is controlling what's allowed to go in and out of that guy. Okay? So at any point in time, the equivalent of calling our previous display method on a tower is saying, show this guy on the screen, and he's always going to be on the screen. So we need to control what's allowed to leave and what's allowed to come back into that particular linear layout. But sitting next to him, invisible to the user because it's not a view, is going to be our actual tower object, which is actually a stack of disk objects, which should mimic what we actually see on the screen. So the very top disk here should have a label that is the same label as at the top of the actual visual tower we see. Does that make sense? So we're going to have a data structure behind the scenes that mimics what we visually see here. Okay. Good enough. Oh, all right. Launch. Use same selection for future launches. Well, that's launching here. I want to see if I purposely introduced a bug for you to find or not. I did. Good. Obviously, I did that on purpose. Here, while that's launching, there is currently a bug in this code. Anybody want to take a stab at what the issue is going to be? It's actually in these two lines, so I'll focus in on it. No, the view group stuff I think is, oh no, temp will be a view. View and view groups are the same. It's just depending on whether or not we know there's stuff that lives inside of there. So, it actually has to do with just this part right here. Oh, did I get an error? All right. So it's just this line right here. What is the difference? So when we talked about the stack data structure 2 classes ago, what's the difference between peak and pop? Go ahead. Okay, so peak lets you see the top of the stack. Pop actually removes it from the top of the stack. This guy right here, get child at 0, it's kind of like a peak move. I'm getting the view at the top of the stack, and I'm trying to put it over here, but I never actually took it away from over here. Okay, so this guy's going to try to be in 2 places at once, which is going to destroy Android's layout because you can't be in the same place at once. You can't be the child of 2 different view groups. All right, so we don't want to just get the child at 0. We want to actually remove that child that's at bucket 0 so that we can go and put him someplace else. Remove view at index. So we'll remove child 0. Oh, what's this guy upset about? I haven't saved it. Oh, that's actually a really poor design if that's the way it works.
Returns void as opposed
Yeah.
to attached to
Yeah, remove view returns void. Well, remove view at index returns void. Okay, that's fine. So we just have to do it in 2 steps. So we'll go back out to what we had here before. We had get child at index. So we got the guy we want. Then we'll go ahead and tell the tower to remove the view. We can either give it the view we want it to remove, or we can just say remove at index, since we know they're the same, right? Temp is the view that lives at index 0. Remove an index, remove view at 0 will be the same thing as remove view temp. Okay, we're saying go and find the guy with that ID. All right. This should be faster if we think about efficiency. Just say go ahead and remove the guy at the top. So now after these 2 lines, temp holds the label we want to remove, and it has actually been removed from the tower. Therefore, we should now be free to put it back onto a new place. You know, that view is now loose, and we can put him someplace else. See, they're talking about the cast down there. I just heard them talking about the Wilder cast. They were saying the creepy cast and the... Oh, well, I'm not sure that was the actual updated version. If it crashes again, then it's the other. Okay, there we go. So I don't want to officially say that the bug for the click thing is fixed, but it appeared to work this time. All right, so we were able to move the guy off of there and push him onto, well, we can't push him yet, but we were able to select our source. That make sense? All right, so for next class, go ahead and bring your code up to date with this and have all the buttons working for, and they should toggle back and forth. So right now, that was my initial move was clicking the source. If I then click Tower 1, it should be chosen as a destination to let us push this guy onto there. Now, for next class, though, we're still not playing Towers of Hanoi. We're not going to wrap it in objects or anything. Just make crap move around. We're not playing by the rules. We're not, this guy is allowed to go on top of Tower 1 or Tower 2, as it is right now. Make sense? So we're working with Android interfaces. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll push this code up to GitHub, and I'll give you a link to it so you can download it and look at what I did with my layouts and stuff like that. But does everybody understand what I'm asking you to do? You're not actually writing Towers of Hanoi yet. You're finishing what we just did. You're actually doing exactly what we just did and adding in a toggle for source and destination. Keeping track of, was the button you just clicked the guy you're choosing to move to temp, to move to our staging area, or is it the guy you want to move from staging area into something else? Cool? All right, I will see everybody on Thursday. All right.